Hello, and I invite you to first and foremost introduce yourself in the chat. And since we have a very short 20 minutes, I'm going to go ahead and get started. So you are in the presentation titled Educators Are Data Scientists. And my name is Holly Windrum. I am the Chief Education Officer with LearnAtric. LearnAtric is a startup ed tech company that I'll share a little bit about, but mostly with a focus today being on this role of being a teacher and an educator, whether you're working with the preschoolers or working with the college students or graduate students, how educators really are data scientists. Forgive me, I just have a moment of needing to navigate my PowerPoint. There we go. So 3 key learner outcomes. I'm not going to read these to you because you're fully capable of doing that, but I'm going to highlight 3 key roles for educators. And within those roles, I'm going to talk about how data science is used to expedite the learning process and the accuracy of identifying student learning needs in order to link data to provide individualized instruction for students. And then I'll end with 3 just practical strategies for your consideration that you can use right away. So when I was planning this, and in order to really unpack, these roles for educators, I thought I need to set the stage for what exactly do data scientists do, and what exactly do educators do, and how do they converge? So it's likely if you're here, you already have some ideas populating in your head, and I invite you to type any in the chat for how educators and data scientists, what are some of the things that they do that are the same? But to start with, data scientists. Well, if you look at job descriptions, like if you went to Indeed, for example, what you would find is that data scientists are making sure they have correct data sets and identifying and making sure data are accurate. They're interpreting data to discover solutions and opportunities for a business or an organization to be able to change and grow. They also create algorithms, so they're really into mining the data to identify trends and important findings. And then a key piece is being able to communicate then to a wide range of audiences. So people that aren't data scientists, that don't do what they do, or may not even be in the business that they're in, but to still be able to communicate these important findings based on the data. So if that's what a data scientist does, so when I went and I did the same look for educators and went to Indeed and some other sites, these are the things I found. So I found, well, educators plan and deliver lessons in an approved curriculum. Okay. They use current methods of teaching to meet the diverse learning needs and interests of students. So, okay. They should support leadership teams to implement the initiatives of the larger organization. In this case, it might be the larger university or the school district, kind of like a strategic plan maybe, or a school improvement plan. They do have to collaborate with other partners, parents, caregivers, support professionals within the schools or within the districts, as well as community partners. But one of the things I noticed, and that you might be noticing right away, is there's something missing. And as I started to look through a variety of these job descriptions for educators, nowhere was I seeing things like database decision maker or collect and analyze student performance data in order to design those lessons that we deliver. So it's a little bit of a head scratcher, because I'm here to make a claim that educators are data scientists. I'm not seeing it in these descriptions. So honestly, initially I was disappointed. I was really confused. See, I am an educator. That's my background. I worked for decades in public and private education settings as a school psychologist, as an educational administrator, chief academic officer. I've worked in several states. I consult nationally, and everywhere I go, educators are data scientists. That's all we do, is we're talking about how are we using data to make educational decision-making, both quantitative and qualitative. So I don't think that these descriptors are wrong, but I also don't think it's complete. So I want to be clear that in order to complete this list, thank you for introducing yourselves in the chat, by the way, that educators are in fact data scientists. So why would I make this claim? Why would I be so passionate about this? Well, because frankly, anyone who works in this profession knows that we are making database decisions all the time. In fact, we could be doing it multiple times, even within an hour of our day. If we're in a classroom full of students, we're constantly monitoring the progress of our student learners. So to be more specific about how educators are data scientists, I'm going to identify 3 areas. Now, again, limited time. So I'm going to talk about educators as expert evaluators, expert innovators, and expert translators, which all boils down to educators as data scientists. So, question for the group. You can type in the chat. What has the most impact on student learning? So there's research. I'm going to throw out a name. There's this guy, John Hattie. And whether you completely agree or disagree, you can't argue with the fact that he does have a considerable body of research that says, look, a lot of things are effective, but there are things that are more effective than others. So I'm looking in the chat. Anyone want to wager or no? What is the number one thing that has the most impact on student learning? I'm using my wait time. Love it. Thank you. Prior knowledge. Thank you for jumping out there. Natalie, that is on the list. Not the number one. Thank you for being brave. Anyone else? Okay, I'm going to give it to you. It is active learning. Thank you. Thank you. I'm seeing some come in. Great. Active learning. Thank you. Yes, active learning is also on the list. Competent teachers. Okay, now we're getting warmer. That's where, okay, hands-on experiences. Absolutely. Yep, you bet. Yes, engagement. And I love how you defined it. Thank you. This means showing up and actually paying attention, and then scaffolding. Love it. And I love the hands-on piece. So none of this is wrong, by the way. All of this is great. All of this really speaks to a lot of what teachers do. The number one thing is actually, believe it or not, what teachers believe. It's a concept called collective teacher efficacy. And I'll give you a kind of academic definition. Collective teacher efficacy is a group of teachers' beliefs. So typically this might be a grade level, a school, a university department. And this is that group's shared belief in the conjoint capabilities to organize and execute the courses of action required to produce given levels of attainment. So research has found that the mere fact that educators believe they can impact student learning will overcome negative effects of things like low socioeconomic status as a potential risk factor for students as they come into the classroom to interfere with their learning. So the question is, so why am I even talking about this? So why am I talking about belief? Well, because how does one develop this sense of efficacy? Well, you have to see impact. You need visible data. You need evidence of learning, right? That's data. So subjective or objective, qualitative, quantitative. So by reflecting on our teaching practices using evidence and moving us forward by looking at our practices and then collecting data, we get a better understanding. We get that feedback loop of how is our teaching impacting whether or not our students are learning. Okay, and that is what research tells us makes the difference. Oops, excuse me. for that. There we go. So I have now set us up to lead into the first way that educators are data scientists, in that we are expert evaluators. So here's the thing. Data scientists and educators, the one thing that, in my opinion, they are both doing as a main role of their jobs is they analyze data for actionable insights. Now, don't get me wrong. There's relationship building with students. Students are not, robots. There's a relational aspect to the work we do, but we're constantly analyzing even the qualitative feedback that we're getting, right, in order to take action. So I started in the field in 2002. I was a young school psychologist, and I led a lot of child study, professional learning community data meetings. And I'll tell you what, this picture is not what my meetings looked like. My meetings, we had copies of Excel spreadsheets. I mean, it was like paper everywhere, and me trying to explain these numbers and summarize trends. Today, when you walk into a school, this is what a data meeting looks like. Everyone has the computer open. There's a screen that's being projected. Everyone's looking at the data, discussing the data, taking notes, because we're looking to make sense of what we're doing, to say, is what we're doing having an impact on student learning? SEL. Thank you for asking. SEL is an acronym for social emotional learning, which is also very critical. Remember, our kids, they need to be affectively engaged before they're cognitively engaged. So educators are expert evaluators. Here's the other thing. Educators are phenomenal innovators. Let me give you an example to illustrate this. So this is the story of Nay. The background to this is because of COVID, some research tells us that nearly 1.6 billion learners, or 90% of the school-age population globally, experience some type of school closure. So Nay is a teacher in Mexico, and I wanna make sure I give you the right information. So she's a teacher in a school in Mexico, and in her words, the way she would describe what she does is she says, I work in a regular school with students who have disabilities. And she says, I'm always thinking about how to improve as a teacher. Okay, so she's always an evaluator of how her teaching is having an impact on student learning. And this is what she says. She says, on a particular day, I was performing an evaluation, looking at data to really know how the pandemic was affecting my students, in particular, because her students are identified as having autism. So they are particularly vulnerable during this time of school closure. So she looked at the data and realized that there were problems with student learning and there were huge gaps. And so her solution wasn't to just say, well, maybe, if only they had more devices, if only they had more, better bandwidth so they could get internet. She took matters into her own hands. She used her own pickup truck and turned it into a portable classroom. She drove 2 hours a day to teach the children who had autism who were on her caseload. These kids didn't have books. These kids didn't have internet, certainly didn't have a device. And so she would sit in the back. They had masks. She had a small table and chairs. And she would do assignments, and she would drive around and do that. It almost sounds like she's a superhero. I mean, that's amazing. Someone who goes above and beyond. That's innovation. That's what educators do. Here's the thing. Educators are thinking like this all the time. So it's pretty impressive. I'll give you another example. This is in higher ed. So this is at the Sam Fox School of Design and Visual Arts. So imagine visual arts, right? Don't you have to be in a studio? Don't you have to be together producing? How do you do that during a pandemic? Well, this class in particular was the field experience class. So how do you do that during a pandemic? So what they did is he partnered, this professor's name is Derek Hofferlin. he partnered with Big Muddy Adventures, which is an organization that provides excursion opportunities on the Mississippi and Missouri rivers. And as a hybrid course, students could participate in person, so a limited number, socially distanced and all of that, but they could also participate via Zoom. And in this particular example, when there was canoeing or kayaking, the students virtually, literally participated doing that virtually. He called it virtual paddling. I'm not even sure what that looked like, but it's pretty doggone creative. And then students were able to generate projects in hybrid ways in order to meet the needs of the coursework. So again, another example of just thinking outside the box and really innovating. The last example of innovation is going to touch on something that's really near and dear to my heart, which is ed tech. And so one of the things with COVID was we saw a lot of students, once the school shut down, they had to go to online learning, and that threw billions of educators globally into a bit of a frenzy. What are we going to do? And so I'm getting my MBA at Chicago Booth, and I became acquainted with Mr. David Spiegler, CEO of LearnAtric, and he was trying to solve a problem that I knew existed, which is how we can move away from online learning being really static and not really adapting and meeting the needs for individualized learners. And so what he is working on with LearnAtric is developing a way literally to put the teacher into the online learning system, so that way the lessons are adaptive and dynamic in real-time response to students. And he's using machine learning to do it. And I told him, I said, if we could do this, this is a game changer. It's not about replacing teachers, but it's about providing this extra level of support, which we know kids are using, whether it's during the pandemic, whether students are being homeschooled, or even within school. They might be participating in some kind of online learning. What a game changer something like this could be. So you had ed tech companies doing that. Last, as expert translators, just like data scientists, our teachers are getting insights all the time, and they have to figure out how they share it, not only with students, with parents, community providers. This is an example of a parent-teacher conference, happens all the time. So they have to be able to take all of that and translate it into something that makes sense and is meaningful to the people that they're working with. So definitely learning how to speak many different languages. So in the interest of time, I did say I would give you some strategies. So I'm going to give you 3 quick ones, and they're going to be in order of effort. So in other words, kind of how big of a lift would this take? So first, when you are reviewing any type of universal screening data or whole class data, one pro tip is in the first review, remove all the student names and then review and discuss. And the reason is because you're making decisions about a whole group. It's not at that point about determining what individual student needs are. So from a resource allocation perspective, it's a lot more productive to look at the needs of the whole first, and then after that's determined, then look at the needs of groups or individuals. With students, a great strategy is set personal best goals with them. So it not only empowers them, but we find that students really, they start to develop more of a growth mindset. And this is really critical. It's a critical skill for students to develop that internal motivation. And frankly, students really like doing that. And last, and you all have probably done this among a million other different great strategies, but getting that just-in-time feedback. So maybe after a lesson or a class, just getting an exit slip, giving students slips of paper, getting a thumbs up, thumbs down, and other, I call them kind of quick and dirty pieces of feedback, so that way you know whether or not kids are getting it. So it's not about evaluating the kids. It's not about causing anxiety on the part of the students. It's about you saying, hey, I gotta know what I need to teach. So give me some feedback on if my teaching is resulting in your learning. So with that, I hope I have given you some good insight, tips, and things to think about with regards to educators as data scientists. Thank you, and here's my contact information. And I'm happy, it sounds like, looks like we're still going. I'm happy to answer any questions in the chat. Thank you. Thank you for attending. So I'm curious, if you're still hanging out and you're inclined, I'd be super interested in, am I able to share? Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I'll share the PDF. Yes, you're welcome. Thank you. If you have any, since again, we're still here, any evidence of attendance for principals? For this particular session, I don't know. I don't know how that's tracked. I'd have to connect with the conference organizers. Or do you mean attendance of principals at data review meetings, for example? Because there is evidence for, so at like a data review meeting, one of the key players or important team members is someone who can make resource allocation decisions, because that is that towards the end of the actionable piece. So you talk about the data, you identify discrepancies and needs, and then you want to take action. Oh, the first. Yeah. So anyway, so you need that resource allocation person, usually principal. I don't know. Conference organizers may know that. They have a list. And if the presentation is still going, which I think it is, it's my first time, I'd be very interested in knowing anyone who has a tip or a practical strategy they'd be willing to share. I think we learn best from each other, frankly, as experts together. All right, let's see here. Oops. Nope. Trying to see if we have more time. I'm happy to have some more discussion. I'm gonna be honest, I can't tell who's here and who's not. Not a tip per se, but I'm working on some Excel. Oh, Brandon, I think that is excellent. So in the chat, Brandon writes, I'm working on some PD material to boost Excel skills for teachers because they're often given access to raw data before district analysts can finish an aggregate project. That's very true. And I'll say that for me, it was a relative area of weakness and still is. And I wish I had stronger Excel skills. I got familiar with Schedula DDC, their item and standard analysis. Okay, I'm not familiar with that, but thank you. Yeah, you know, with EdTech, one of the nice things that, at least from an assessment standpoint, is the better companies will have a lot of reports that can help do some of that aggregating and analyzing. But to Brandon's point, depending on what you're using, you often have these raw data. And then you're trying to summarize it in order to put it together so you know what to teach. Daniel, ask students for input on specific elements of their progress to track, to add what we're already doing and help them feel involved with the process. 100%. So that goes back to, I went through pretty quickly because